Courtenay-Alberni.
Well, thank you, Mr. Speaker. And Mr. Speaker, before I get started, I just want to respond to a comment from my colleague from New Brunswick who talked about the impact on forestry workers and communities. And Mr. Speaker, he talked about his family connection to the forestry sector. I also have a family connection, Mr. Speaker. My great-grandfather and my great-grandmother lived in Ocean Falls, where my great-grandfather was the paper maker. My grandmother, my late grandfather, also were there, and my mom was there. And when Ocean Falls went from a thriving community of 3,500 people to the 70 people it is today, as it collapsed, we saw intergenerational families disperse. And the impact that had not just on community, but on families, Mr. Speaker, and the cost of that. So we got to do everything we can to ensure that communities like Courtenay-Alberni and the communities where he lives, that doesn't happen, Mr. Speaker, and we need to work collectively. So today I'm honored to bring the voice of workers, of people in the forest sector, communities, and First Nations in the riding of Courtenay-Alberni that are here for lobbying, Mr. Speaker, for this federal government to take this issue seriously. We know the softwood lumber industry is a $23.3 billion industry that generates around 200,000 direct jobs. But, Mr. Speaker, it also is responsible for 182,000 indirect jobs for Canadian workers and supports livelihoods in over 300 communities across this country. Mr. Speaker, we need to take an all-hands-on-deck approach. We need to rethink how we're looking at the forest sector. Like my colleague from Saanich Gulf Islands said, it's an opportunity also for us to start maximizing the use of our fiber. And as we tackle the housing crisis, we can use mass timber and modular construction supported by Canadian softwood lumber, which also can help cut affordable housing build times in half and reduce emissions associated with home building by up to 60%. But we need to treat this like an emergency, like we did in COVID. This government is not moving at that pace. In addition, Mr. Speaker, obviously we need to retool, but also supporting biomass utilization, including it as a source of clean energy, makes both economic and environmental sense. It supports billions in economic activity while comprising only one part of an all-out necessary hands-on-deck approach to reduce the prevalence and spread of wildfires. But this take note debate, as we know, it's critical timing because the softwood lumber is in crisis. Since 2017, tariffs have drained nearly $10 million, Mr. Speaker, from Canada's forestry sector, and the BC softwood lumber industry is facing up to 45% tariffs. Trump's tariffs on softwood lumber are higher, Mr. Speaker, get this, than those currently in place on Vladimir Putin's Russia. It isn't just tariffs. The softwood lumber is also on the front lines of the climate crisis. Wildfire damages have cost Canadians over $1 billion annually, and this figure will only increase over time. Without urgent action, the massive emissions wildfires produce will trap us in a devastating cycle of environmental and economic degradation. In August, the Prime Minister announced $1.2 billion in new funding to support the forestry sector, far less than the other sectors, Mr. Speaker, and worse, that money hasn't got out to producers. They haven't even been able to access the promised relief, and they're still waiting for that money to come through. Further, only $50 million of that money, 4%, is earmarked for worker supports. I said it before in this House, and I'll say it again. That's not a plan. That's an insult. Worse, owner-operators and contractors often, many of them, remain excluded from those worker supports, despite how crucial the softwood lumber is to our economy. The Prime Minister continues, Mr. Speaker, to be in the U.S. talking about other sectors and not talking about forestry. You go right now and you look at the news, and the headline is about bailing out the steel industry. Well, I can assure you, Mr. Speaker, it won't be the same. It will not be the same as what he's offering the forest sector. We know that, Mr. Speaker. And we are going to continue to act on supporting productive ideas, but we're also going to be propositional, like we did with the biomass tax credit, Mr. Speaker, which will hopefully generate and unlock around $6 billion in investment. But, Mr. Speaker, we also need to make sure that Team Canada and the U.S. are working collectively together with major strategic interests, from as we have with energy, critical minerals and continental supply chains to hydroelectric energy, softwood lumber and Arctic cooperation. We need a more comprehensive high-level negotiating framework similar to what the EU has achieved, which could provide the leverage needed to resolve softwood and other long-standing issues. We need a Team Canada approach, Mr. Speaker. We need this government to act with urgency. Thank you.
Questions and comments. Questions et commentaires. The Honourable Parliamentary Secretary to the Minister of Energy and Natural Resources.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, and thanks to my colleague. I really want to give a special extension of thanks because of his work on the biomass ITC, which he was instrumental in helping bring forward. I did want to offer a comment that I would hope he'd respond to, though, in terms of the trade negotiations with the United States and the psychology of the U.S. president, which I will be modest in my comments about, but he is a deal maker, and he does, come from a deals beget deals environment. And given that, and given his interest in some of those other sectors, I wonder if my colleague would just respond to the notion that perhaps just by starting with the things that Donald Trump is most interested in discussing, if that could not build momentum towards a softwood lumber deal. And before I hand it over, I do want to say we will fight every day for the forestry sector.
Member for Courtenay-Alberni.
Well, Mr. Speaker, we've seen the government retaliate. We've seen them come back and fight back. But, Mr. Speaker, they're not leveraging when it comes to the forest sector. When it comes to softwood lumber, maybe they target steel or they'll go after auto, and we'll see the government fight back. But we're not seeing that same attitude when it comes to the softwood lumber industry, Mr. Speaker. This dispute's been going on since 2017. It's way too long. And you don't hear the Prime Minister talking about it. He comes back from Washington. How often have you heard him talk about softwood lumber when he comes back from Washington? I can tell you, Mr. Speaker, not once. He has not stood in Washington even once and said this is a top priority in his negotiations while he's in Washington.
Questions and comments. The Honourable Member for Tobique-Mactaquac.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, and I want to thank my honourable colleague from Courtenay-Alberni for his very good remarks and very thoughtful. I will say that it's absolutely important that there's urgency to getting this resolved. And what's evident so far is there's been no urgency from the government in getting softwood lumber. It's been 10 years. Under former Prime Minister Stephen Harper, they got to a deal in 80 days. The fact that this has gone on 10 years, we are causing a death of the forestry sector by delay. Delay in dealing with what needs to be dealt with. It's time to get back to the table and think big picture and get the best deal possible for Canada's forestry workers. We need urgency from that side of the House. I hope you'll join me in asking the government, demanding the government to take action for our forestry workers. Thank you.
Recognize the member for Courtenay-Alberni. The member used the you. The Speaker will not be joining anyone, but I invite the member for Courtenay-Alberni to respond.
Mr. Speaker, the federal government's created a federal industry national working group when it comes to steel, when it comes to aluminum. But they still haven't done that for forestry, Mr. Speaker. They haven't got a roundtable that includes workers, the forest producers. Mr. Speaker, this is completely ridiculous at this point in the game. So we're asking for the federal government to create a softwood working group, a table that can mandate to fast-track solutions on duties, liquidity, and Canada's negotiating posture so that we can finally get a secure and fair, durable softwood lumber agreement. Why is it taking so long for the government to bring this working group together?
Questions and comments. Questions et commentaires. L'honorable député de Jean.
Honourable Member for Jonquière. I'd like to thank my colleague, who's always on point in terms of this issue. There's a lot of initiatives here we've heard, including a bill on the use of wood. Unfortunately, this bill, even if it was adopted, doesn't have any teeth because it's not binding. So they were telling the government to use the bath to wood, even though in the past they've been told to use it as well. I find this strange. Should the government not have measures that allows us to think of carbon footprint when they issue their tenders, and also for the use of wood? This should be binding in the government's calls for tender in the forestry sector.
Courtenay-Alberni.
Well, thank you very much, Mr. Speaker. I want to thank my colleague. He's been an incredible champion for the forest product sector in Quebec. And I work with him, Mr. Speaker, on the All-Party Forestry Caucus, and it's been a real pleasure on this very important issue. Mr. Speaker, in terms of what we need to do and look at, we need to take an all-out approach, whether it be mass timber, ensuring that when we build houses in this country, we use Canadian-made wood. Mr. Speaker, the biomass tax credit, using every opportunity to create value out of our fiber here, Mr. Speaker. But what it comes down to is we need a negotiated settlement. That's what we're all talking about here. But it needs to be all hands on deck, and this sector needs to be prioritized. Like every other sector that's being hit with Donald Trump's tariffs, that is not the case right now, Mr. Speaker.